Hello and welcome to episode 80 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. Sam, we have become octogenarians.
Yeah, it's a big milestone.
In terms of our episode numbers. So we hit 80. Today, I think I'm going to entitle this episode Tom Bombadil with at least 4 or 5 question marks. We're talking Rings of Power updates, 2 in particular. We pretty recently talked about the trailer that came out for season 2.
Yeah, we had a strong trailer breakdown. I listened to a few other, just to take a second to review our own podcast. I watched a few other trailer breakdowns, and I think we did a pretty good job of picking things out and noticing things. So I'm proud of us.
Yeah, so go back in the 70s. I think it was like episode 77, I think, was our Rings of Power. Yeah, because 78 was House of Dragons, 79 was Mead, and here we are with 80. So go back, watch our Rings of Power trailer review. There's someone missing from that trailer review that we didn't really realize until recently, and that is Bronwyn. So we're talking Tom Bombadil and Bronwyn in this episode of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. Sam, how are you?
Doing pretty well. Getting ready for our season 2 of House of the Dragon. I'm in the middle of Fire and Blood, which is the book that the House of the Dragon is based on. But reading that whetted my appetite for George R.R. Martin. And so over Memorial Day weekend and then this past weekend, I read the entirety of the first book in A Song of Ice and Fire, A Game of Thrones. So I'm George R.R. Martin out right now. In a good way.
I was going to say, that's normally not used in a good way.
Well, it does, reading Game of Thrones reminded me of the first time I read it, which was back in 2011. I think it was after the first season came out. And there were a handful of scenes that I remember reading for the first time and being just blown away by how good they were. And it just kind of makes it hurt a little bit more that we still don't have the next book in that series. But
I don't think you're ever going to get it.
Yeah,
truly, only because like I saw a picture of George R.R. Martin recently.
Like the Grim Reaper is gonna,
dude. I was thinking this 10 years ago, like when Game of Thrones was really in its heyday in terms of the show.
Yeah.
And man, I don't know if he's going to make it. Because apparently he hasn't even really started it.
No, well, if you can believe what he says, he is 75% of the way done. But that's kind of weird math, right? And that's not, so he hasn't said that. He's talked about how many pages he's written and how many different chapters he has or something along those lines, but people have tried to kind of parse it out. The issue is, he may have written a lot of pages, but they need to be edited and they need to be, it's apparently just a massive book, even without being edited. So they need to figure out how they're going to come out with it. I've heard some speculation that it could come out in multiple volumes if it ever does. And apparently he's written a bunch and kind of gone back and rewritten chapters. And it's just this, I don't know if he's not good at finishing things, which is a very obvious statement, but apparently he's also started and not finished a handful of other sci-fi series that have just not been as popular as Game of Thrones. And they've been plagued with similar issues. So I think he's made a lot of noise about how he wants to finish it so then he can go and write some other stories. But I don't know. It might be one of those things where it's always going to be the book that could come out this year, and then it never does. And yeah, he's up there in years, so who knows?
I think he screwed himself when he allowed writers to finish the story without the book being done. That's just me personally. That's my personal belief.
I'm not gonna argue, but we're not here to talk about George R. R. Martin.
Yeah. So Tom Bombadil, Rings of Power season 2. We talked quite a while ago when some of the first news was breaking about Rings of Power season 2 when they were announcing some of the actors that they were bringing on to the show. And one of the actors that I at least voiced some excitement about was a guy named Rory Kinnear. He is most famous, at least from my perspective, from a show where he played Frankenstein's monster in a show called Penny Dreadful. I believe it was on Showtime. I watched it after the fact on Netflix. So if you can find Penny Dreadful, it is a very, very good monster horror show. We found out after some images were released from set that Rory Kinnear is actually playing Tom Bombadil. And the first question I have in my notes is just why, Sam? Why?
Yeah,
I don't. This
because
isn't for you.
they
Yeah,
loathe their own audience.
I'm not
they
forcing you to like give me a real answer as to why Tom Bombadil, but this is just a question I had for the ether, and I was shouting this out when I saw the image. And my biggest problem, everything we know about Tom Bombadil, like there's no backstory. He just exists. And
that's kind of the deal.
yeah, and that's part of the allure of this character is that there are a lot of different fan theories as to who he is, what he is. There's people who think Tom Bombadil is a Luvatar. There's people who think Tom Bombadil is a Maiar. Like there's so many different guesses that people have, and none of them are right because Tolkien didn't give us a backstory for this character.
And it's very likely that Tolkien himself didn't really know, right?
Yes.
In
Yeah.
his letters, doesn't he kind of make some statements about how it, oh, could be this, but he's never definitive, and those are obviously just personal letters.
But let's look at what we do know about Tom Bombadil. He is a joyous being. He's always
So
smiling and
what's he
happy.
doing on this show?
But my point though is like in all of the images where we see that were released, he's not smiling in any of them. He doesn't look joyous or happy.
Yeah, there's no Goldberry.
There's no, well, there still could be, but not at
Yeah,
this point. But
it
are
looks like
they,
he's interrogating Gandalf in a like a noir scene, right? Like
yeah.
Gandalf sitting in that chair and the lights all like on their faces only. It's
So like I look at it and I go, you're not even giving us the Tom Bombadil so far that we're familiar with. And if they're going to invent a backstory for this character, I we've talked in the past, like I don't trust them to come up with good ideas. So even if they're not going to follow any of the lore that's been established for this character, I don't trust them to bring up something that's worth
well.
showing.
Do you remember? Do you remember the leaks that we covered and how somebody there's a leak that says Tom Bombadil is Melkor serving penance for his crimes, and that Goldberry is Ungoliant, and they're together, kind of being punished for to spend all eternity in these forms. That was the leak before there was any confirmation that Bombadil is in this. So obviously, you could easily have Tom Bombadil, and that backstory is not what the show is going to do. But at least part of that leak is now confirmed in that Tom Bombadil apparently is in the show,
Yeah.
which I think we discussed that being an absolutely terrible idea when it was
Yeah,
released. Yeah.
yes. We panned it. Yeah.
To me, it doesn't make any sense because the only people who know who Tom Bombadil is are are people who've read the book, and that is not necessarily the people and those people are not going to like this because it is so far from the book for they're going to have to come up with a really good reason, and I just don't trust them to do that for why he's in the show from a meta standpoint. And then what is he doing in Rune? Not, I mean, he doesn't have to be in the old forest, but he's so far removed from where we are used to him that it's not going to resonate with book readers in the way that you want it. You're not going to get book readers to go, oh, it's Tom Bombadil. Like, no, he's going to be in the fucking desert, right?
No, readers are good. The people who read, and you have a good point. The people who read the books and understand Tom Bombadil are the same people who were pissed with the direction of the show. So, including Tom Bombadil, and let's use Fallout for example. I don't know if you've watched the new
I
Fallout
haven't. No.
series. So, very good show. Highly recommend it. There are a lot of instances in the Fallout show that are Easter eggs to the games, and you only understand the Easter egg if you've seen the game or if you've played the game. But the show is at a quality point where you can use Easter eggs like that and people are excited about it. Rings of Power is at a point where they're doing Easter eggs and it feels like they're doing it just to do it, or including characters just to include characters because they exist. And the fans who would understand these references don't like them because they're ill-placed Easter eggs. They're characters that shouldn't be used, and the fan base is already pissed off. So why would you? I mean, I know why they're doing it. I don't know. I have such a hard time with this show,
Yeah.
and I took the stance more, and we did towards the end of Rings of Power, where we said it's not for us. You can like it. The general audience can like the show, but it's not a good show for at least Sam and I. Even when I take myself out of it and I just treat it like fan fiction, a fantasy show, I don't know if I can feel that way anymore about it. Like I'm pretty negative across the board. And then we look at the news of Joseph Mawley leaving and being recast. And that's Sam Hazeldine. In the trailer, it still looks like Adar because it's Sam Hazeldine in like full prosthetics to look like Joseph Mawley. So I'm hoping that I can get past that a little bit. But then we found out right after the trailer dropped that the actress Nazanin Boniati, who played Bronwyn, is not coming back for season 2, and her character isn't being recast. So when you look at all of these things that are going on, it's hard to not draw conclusions and be like, the actors don't like the show.
No. Yeah,
because
absolutely not.
two of them left.
Molly's justification was like he wants to go and tell other stories or something like that, right? It
Yep.
was, and then Boniati, she said that she's like stepping away from acting, like the exact opposite thing of telling other stories. She doesn't want to tell any story. She's she's not even acting anymore, and
she's doing advocacy work.
Which it's actually kind of, I don't want to say it's not interesting. It's kind of unfortunate because those were the two completely brand new characters who were actually interesting. Adar was very interesting, and Bronwyn was, if not interesting, at least a good character. She moved the story forward. She had some emotional depth to her. I know a lot of people didn't totally love the love story, but at least it was something quasi interesting that didn't offend the lore too much.
Well, my issue with that love story, and I know we've talked about it in the past, it's just lazy writing. The Amazon Studios writers were like, "Oh, what's something that we can use as a love story? Oh, Tolkien had a relationship between an elf and a human twice. Why don't we just do it for a third time?" So that to me was just super lazy. But Bronwyn and Adar were the two characters I liked the most from season 1. And I'll even go so far as to say I liked Arondir as well. Like those may have been my top 3 characters. All 3 of them were in the Mordor storyline, and 2/3 of them are gone now. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm just disheartened.
To read a quote from you from the Vanity Fair article that unveiled the Tom Bombadil inclusion.
I was quoted in Vanity Fair.
Not you.
You said I'm going to read a quote from you in Vanity Fair.
Excuse me. I'm going to read a quote to you. He has no clear dramatic function that would justify his inclusion in a really great movie adaptation. He's whimsical and magical and almost verging on silly, but he also has the wisdom of the ages and the music of the spheres and deep emotional wells of ancient history and myth. And his conception and function are tied to Norse myths and have deep roots in European fairy tale, McKay says. So weirdly, he's the kind of most Lord of the Rings thing in Lord of the Rings. And also the first thing that you would cut if you were adapting it as a film. But we have the advantage of a television show, and hence we are going to find a way to tap into that.
Again, then that doesn't explain the why to me.
Yeah, it's just like,
Like
oh,
what
because
he said to me in that was Jackson couldn't put him in the movies because it didn't make sense. We have a show and we're gonna shoehorn him into our show
yeah,
because we can.
we're gonna waste your fucking time because Jackson, rightly so, and I think even Tolkien says this. Tom Bombadil doesn't really have a narrative function in the story. Like, yes, he saves the hobbits twice, but that wasn't necessary. There could have been a different explanation. There could have been a different way for the hobbits to been rescued from those scenarios. And Tom Bombadil could have been a different character, right? It could have been, oh, it's another elf that we encountered in the woods, just like we
But
did earlier. But
it's
now
the
the
same.
stakes are a little bit higher. Like
It's the same thing where you just remove those chapters from the book, and the book just moves on. And that's
yeah,
what Peter Jackson's
and it worked
adaptation
it
proves.
worked
Yeah.
perfectly. And you get little people like me who are like, well, if how did Mary stab the Witch King if he didn't have the dagger from the barrow, right? Which whatever, it's a movie. It doesn't need to be perfectly explained. Like in the novel, Tolkien explicitly references the why that dagger in particular was helpful in that situation, but the movie doesn't establish that lore, and so you don't need it, and it's not actually a plot hole. I just like the stupid thing. Yes, I agree with you that he was saying, we're gonna shoehorn it into this television show because we have 8 hours or however many hours of screen time they're going to have as opposed to what a movie run would be. But all this hullabaloo, whimsical, magical, deep emotional wells of ancient history and myth. He's a goofy character with like what is it, a blue hat or a yellow hat and like green shoes. Isn't he based on a doll that one of Tolkien's children had as a child? I think that explains his kind of ridiculous clothing. So it's just Tolkien did little things like this without a clear explanation and with no role in the story. And to throw him in here it's just such a great example of how they are grasping for anything interesting.
And I'm hopeful because I do like Rory Kinnear and I think he's a great actor. So I'm hoping that they can do something with this character. But like I said, like you look at the images that they released of Tom Bombadil, and he doesn't look anything like the joyous character that Tolkien created. Then you couple that with Bronwyn's actress not coming back, but her son and Arondir are both going to be in season 2. And then we were talking outside of our recording. What are they going to do with her character if she's not being recast? Did they write her off? Did they kill her?
Yeah,
Did they?
it's gonna turn out that she died from all those arrows to the heart that were superficially healed by Arondir. Yeah, they're gonna kill her off screen.
Man.
This is the Poochie went back to his own planet, which is a reference you don't get because you're not a Simpsons
No.
person. Okay, so I'm sorry. And maybe we should have read the Vanity Fair article in advance, but I have it up here. There's another thing just that highlights to me their thinking and all this. This is Payne. So JD Payne. We started thinking, what does he care about? And how can that be a doorway to drama? We know he cares about the natural world, and we know he's a helper. He's not going to push you, but he will help you. Which,
Again, no, he won't.
yeah, it's also that sentence tells me that they didn't say what's a good story and what are the characters that would naturally be involved in a good story. It's who are the characters that we can grab, and then how can we justify including them in this story that we're trying to tell. So it's like they this is just them grabbing names from the book and trying to figure out how you can shoehorn them in. And they can wrap all the literary criticism language around it that they want to, but at the end of the day, that's what this is, because I want to say they don't know how to write original characters, which is kind of partially true with the because for every Bronwyn and Adar you had, you also had all of the halfling crap. What are they called? The Harfoots.
Hmm.
You had all that garbage, and yeah, it's the slight bit of optimism that I had after watching the trailer has really been eaten away by this.
But I don't even think it's their inability to write new characters. It's their inability to also adapt characters.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't, because let's look at Galadriel. Her adaptation is horrific. If the stranger is truly Gandalf, that adaptation is horrific. So all of these, dude, my issues with Gilgalad being just this
Oh yeah,
idiot king who's supposed to be the most wisest elvish king left in Middle Earth. So I don't trust them to adapt Tom Bombadil in a way. And it's even more problematic with Bombadil because there's no real material to go off of. It's a very vague character. So anything that they put forth is going to be almost complete fabrication with nothing to go off of. So yeah, I think I've said my piece. I'm just really bothered by this.
okay, here.
Like you said, the trailer gave me some hope, and then these two news articles.
We've talked about it before. I think we even mentioned it, or I think you mentioned it in the trailer breakdown of if the stranger is Gandalf, which it seems like it is, and he's going to Rune, why doesn't he interact with the two blue wizards who went east? And I think they're again the really strident book people say, well, they didn't they're not in Middle Earth at this point. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Neither was Gandalf, but you could say that they are. And if the Tom Bombadil character is going to be responsible for pushing the stranger slash Gandalf to some course of action, why can't that be the Blue Wizards? Right? It would make more sense from the standpoint that the Blue Wizards were specifically sent to intervene in the affairs of Middle Earth for the good. And if somehow they have been successful or unsuccessful, or maybe one of the wizards has fallen to the dark side, which I know it's not the dark side, but you get what I'm saying. Maybe that can be a lesson of caution for the stranger and he can understand the stakes that he faces. But Tom Bombadil, he, like, the funny thing is too that if he cares enough to push the stranger, what do we know about him in the book from the Council of Elrond is that he is very powerful, right? But he exists in a different dimension almost, where he's beyond the world.
He just doesn't give a shit about what goes on.
Yeah, but so what they're saying is, oh, he does give a shit, but he won't do anything.
Or they're gonna, like I said, with like filling in backstory for the character though. Maybe this series is going to explain why he just wants to live in his own little hut with Goldberry and all of that.
Yes, so he's going to care about the world to the point where he will nudge the stranger, using the words from the article. But at the same time, he's also incredibly powerful, very wise, and very old. And he refuses to do anything. You know what this is? This is the level 20 NPC that tasks the level 1 party with their first quest. And the obvious question is, well, why don't you do it?
They got other things going on.
Yeah, that's what it is. But here he doesn't have that. It's like Gandalf was always fucking off to deal with the White Council stuff during the Adventures in the Hobbit, and that was a really good explanation for why wasn't the wizard there to help you with the so and so and the who now. They're gonna have to come up with a pretty good explanation for why Tom Bombadil apparently has been around for thousands of years, caring about the world, motivating other people to do something about it, but himself not intervening. So I think it's going to be a strange conundrum here, which.
And the best part is that the people who are writing this, I don't trust at all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it all comes back to. If I had enjoyed season 1, all of the actors were returning, and then season 2, they're like, oh yeah, and Tom Bombadil's going to be in it. My excitement level would be far different than it is right now. If it was a good show with writing that I trusted, yeah, bring on Tom Bombadil. I'm sure they could write it in a way that would make sense and do the character justice. But yeah, it's just you're doing it to do it, and
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to do it well.
And nobody's going to know who he is. He wasn't in the Peter Jackson movies. He wasn't in the Ralph Bakshi animated. He's in a small part of the very beginning of the book, not central to the action. It's gonna be one of those things where you're the showrunner, and you've just decided to do this because of reasons. It's very unfortunate, but
see, that's telling. If Bakshi decided not to do Bombadil, Amazon Studios definitely should not have chosen to do
yeah, not
Bombadil.
The twisted mind of Ralph Bakshi would put Tom Bombadil in his Lord of the Rings adaptation.
Dare touch Tom Bombadil.
Yeah.
But that was episode 80 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. Just a little brief touch on Bombadil and Bronwyn in Rings of Power Season 2. Next week, we have our Season 2 premiere of House of Dragon that we will be covering. So join us over the next, 8 episodes? Probably 10 episodes? House of Dragon Season 2?
I think it's only 8.
Well, regardless, stick with us as we cover each episode as they come out. New episodes on Sunday on Max, HBO Max, and our episodes will drop on Wednesdays. So watch the episode and then listen to ours to see how we felt about the show. You can follow us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group that's called the Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things podcast. You can email us at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com, all one word. But that's it for me. You got anything else, Sam?
That's all we got. I think I'm looking forward to the start of House of the Dragon. Like I said, I'm reading Fire and Blood, the source material. No spoilers, but things are going to get bloody and fiery. And it is going to be, hopefully they can build upon a strong foundation of Season 1. So yes, catch us for that. And then we will see you on the airwaves. Bye, everybody.